So this is the non-melodramatic history of my life. So, so I had multiple interests all my life. I work in different ways in Mexico. I studied theater and music. My father wanted me to be a physicist for some reason, so I decided to study mathematics just so that made him feel like I was doing something that he wanted, but and I actually do like physics, but didn't pursue that. So then I came to the States around 42 years ago, before most of you were born. I think only Lou and I were here at that time. And then at that time, I had the idea I still wanted to probably study acting, but I have a slight accent. I said, that's not going to work here. So I decided to study literature. And then because you have all these basic requirements, I also took mathematics and did a minor. And then I met then my first wife, which turned out to be a superstar in literature. And I went to school where the only way that you could get rejected is if you did not apply. So since I applied, so I said, I'm taking some classes with her, and she's so way above everybody. Needless to say, I didn't know that she was going to become one of the foremost persons, feminists in literature. But at that point, I said, well, I think I'm not competitive. Certainly, I was not competitive with her in that and many other fields. But that was the key. So I decided, what should I do now? So I said, well, I'm going to go into mathematics. That's the only option that I have now. So I applied to several grad schools, and I didn't get accepted in it. And I must say that I took a statistics there, and I got a C. So, so I used to say this story when I was chair of the biometrics unit. It was a statistics group at Cornell, and they thought I was making it up. And at one point, I thought, I'm going to get my transcript. I'm going to post it on my website. So but anyway, so I did that, and then I applied to also, and every single school rejected me except the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So guess where I went? I went to Milwaukee. I got a master's degree there. Then I worked for a while, and then I applied to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is what I always wanted to do, and many other schools. And then everybody accepted me, so I was happy. I went to Madison. And then I moved there from the pure mathematics work that I had done at Milwaukee. We had to do more with set theory and things like that. I started to study what I thought it was applied mathematics, which is partial differential equations, still very, very pure. And then at that point, Madison was associated with the Math Science Research Institute. That was associated with the Army. And I was not very keen of being associated. And needless to say, over the years, my relationship has changed because the fact as a student, you don't know what that means. And what that means is that there is a lot of funds that get distributed for people to do research, but it's not classified research. And then after I worked many years in other programs, I actually became interested in doing some things that are, I never have had any clearance, but that are necessary of importance for the security of the world. So I've been interested in those issues, but at that time I didn't have to do. So I decided I'm going to do mathematical biology. That was my decision. That was and there was really only one professor. That was Fred Brower. So I found him in the hall, and I said, can I take a reading course with you? So he gave me a book. I look at it, another book, I look at it. And then I said, can you give me a problem? So this was in January, so by March I said, give me a problem, and then since I think he realized that I haven't really read everything that he had given me, so he would see me every week and say, have you solved the problem? And it turned out to be I couldn't solve that problem, but I found another problem by doing that, and 2 months later I had a problem solved, and then he told me, Carlos, you have a thesis. And I said, you must be kidding. And I said, no, you do. And I said, well, I have to tell you a secret phrase. I haven't taken my qualifiers, and I haven't finished my coursework. So that became a complicated story. But eventually, I think now they can't fail me. So I did graduate. And then to avoid taking a qualifier, I took some courses in biology, because that way I had to take only 2. And this is a true story. I'm not making this. I just so I went to the bookstore, and I looked at all these books, and there was this book, Theoretical Plant Ecology, and I looked, oh, this has equations. I might be able to understand something. And I was being taught by a really wonderful theoretical plant ecologist, Dan Waller, which actually you know him well. And so I went and took his course, and he was incredibly receptive and encouraging. That's probably the course that I enjoyed the most that time. But I needed one more course. So I decided, what, you know, so I couldn't find any course with a question. So I look at the bookstore, and I run into a book by James Crow, Population Genetics. So this is a question. So, oh, he's at Wisconsin. So I went and knocked at his door, and I said, Professor Crow, I'm doing this and that and in mathematics. Can I take a reading course with you? And he said, yes. And I didn't know that I was entering into the life of one of the foremost population geneticists that we have had. And then I took this reading course, and I remember vividly there was a Monday, must be some holiday, and we met every Monday, and I told the week before, are we meeting next week? And I can still remember his face. Now he passed away. Now he can remember his face. Like, what kind of question is that? You know, it's, of course, if you have a laugh and you're a scientist, you go Monday, Tuesday, Sunday, and you are always there. So, you know, holidays, it's just like, what do you mean by? So I never asked that question again. I went there. And when I finished my reading course, he took me to meet Sue Albright. And so we had lunch with him. He talked a lot about guinea pigs and so forth. And I didn't know who Sue Albright really was. And this is, so this one, but suddenly I got very inspired by these interactions, by support of Fred, and then I decided to apply to do math biology. So I had, I was most likely going to get a postdoc in PDs and Berkeley, and I said, no, I don't want to do more existence and uniqueness. I don't want to do that. So I had written to several people, including Simon Levin. Why did I write to Simon Levin? Because if you look at the math biology literature, his name was everywhere. He edited all the volumes, he wrote all the key papers. So I said, oh, he must be good. So I wrote to him. And then I wrote to several people. And then I eventually met Simon at UCLA while I was interviewing for math jobs. And he said, called me the next day and said, why do you come? And that changed, that took me into a different world. So, so I finished my postdoc with him in '88. I learned a lot of biology. I learned a lot about life from him. And then I got lots of job offers in all sorts of departments from Harvard. I got offers from Cornell. Many other universities. Decided to stay at Cornell, where I stayed for 18 years in multiple appointments. And then in 2003, I moved to Arizona State. And people always say, why did you move to Arizona State? I always that question. I love Cornell. I still have an appointment there. I still have money at Cornell. I don't know why they haven't thrown me completely out. But I I remember I came from Stevens Point. And I said, you know, most of these students don't go to Cornell. And I got to be a professor at an Ivy League school. This, if it was possible for me, it should be possible for almost anybody. So that was the general idea. So let me tell you something about a lot of it has to do with mentors. And mentors is just not one mentor. I have had multitude of mentors. And this was Gil Walter in Milwaukee, which helped me through. And at one point I want to quit. I just why he told me, no, you can continue. So I did this. This was Fred Brower. He's now 82. And he has been helping with my summer program for 20 years. And he forced me to work harder than I even thought possible. So we just wrote, you know, one new edition of our book and another book, and we haven't finished the other book because I'm not working hard enough. But other than that, the other was obviously Simon Levin, and so in just last year we renamed the center after Simon Levin. We invited some of his distinguished former students like Luke Ross and Alan Hastings and Mercedes Pascual to be some of the speakers. You know, if we wanted to invite everybody, just would have to have like a 10-day conference, and that was impossible. But we renamed it after him. And but I had other mentors associated with that, and one was Ken Cook, which passed away. He told me about functional differential equations, and he made me feel like he didn't know functional differential, and I knew, and I didn't realize that every time I asked a question, he already knew the answer, but he let me find it out by myself. And And then Herbert Headcoat, which is more like a competition, but that was a mentorship because he always did faster things than I could do, and he was already a professor. And he did some seminal work with Jim York associated with that. And there's another guy, although both of them have been great for me. This is Richard Rana, my colleague at Cornell. But it's also Stavros Busenberg, which is a fantastic mathematician, could write with 2 hands, could speak 5, 6 languages, incredible chef, black belt in karate, and then suddenly gets Lou Gehrig's disease and dies just in about a matter of 9 months. So these are some of the people. Now you see there is no underrepresented minorities here. Why? Because there aren't many. But I knew where they were, and they were influential in my life. One of the most influential was David Blackwell. And I didn't know who he was. You can see that's a theme in my life. I don't know who really the people that have done good things. And I was a member of the MSRI, one of the committees of the Math Science Research Institute, and they were talking about David Blackwell. I said, who's David Blackwell? And everybody looked at me, okay. And I quickly realized the foremost African-American mathematician that we have had in this country, who the first ever to speak at the International Congress of Mathematics. In addition to that, when he was at Princeton, the chair of the math department didn't want him to use the library, so wrote a letter that he could not use the library, because that was. And they established the Department of Statistics at Berkeley so they could hire him, because math would not hire him. Okay, so this is how important this. And unfortunately, he won the National Medal of Science. I'm in that committee. And his son went to receive it posthumously, and it's always a pity when somebody receives some award of this when after they pass away. But it's rarely given posthumously, but this is one of the cases. The other mathematician has big influence in my life. At a distance now, we become with friends. Is Richard Tapeder. He's with my daughter and the former provost of Rice University when he got the National Medal of Science also. And he has a wonderful mentor, very Texan. I can't describe this. You have to listen to it. You can look at his videos. This guy touches the life of. Probably the only way that I have not touched the life of African Americans and Latinos just in the same way. At one point, he gave a talk at a part of the institute in Minnesota, IMA, at a correctional facility. And the director, then Dr. Arnold Tomicalos, I was very, very nervous. And then I saw the reaction and his interaction with this, and it was unbelievable, Carlos. It was the most incredible thing how he could motivate and get these guys going. So that's Richard Tapia. Bill Bell is also another mathematician. He was president of SACNAS, and he convinced me to do something more than talk. And then I have other people that have been influential. This is James Sylvester Gates, which we talk a lot. He was MLK professor at MIT, so was I, and I know him for a lot. He gets the National Medal of Science there, too. And then one of my closest friends has become, over the last few years, Wesley Harris. He says, Carlos, we are warriors. And this is our personal call to arms, and he's my connection to Martin Luther King. He was really connected to that. So out of my ignorance, I established the Blackwell-Tapia Award at Cornell in 2000, and now has become, it rotates around the institutes, including here. And it has been, last time was won by a statistician, Jacqueline Hughes Oliver. And these are the very prominent people. It rotates around the institutes. It has become very important. And it's named after 2 National Medal of Science winners, which is Blackwell Tapia, here is his children, and Richard Tapia. Okay. So what has been the outcomes of my education? I have had 34 PhD students. And of them, there have been 19 underrepresented minorities. And then I have had about 25 postdoctoral students. And of course, I have many master's students. And then I established a PhD at Arizona State in 2008, and that has graduated already 23 PhDs, including 17 that are from underrepresented groups. So this is really, this is a program where you are, in fact, you are no longer a minority, and that's important. So ASU was recognized as the largest producers of Latino PhDs in 2010 and 11. And if I had money, it would be every year. It's just hard to support a lot of students. But ASU is in the center of Latino land, used to produce 1 Latino PhD every 20 years, and now we do about 4 or 5 per year on the average. And I mentioned my interests. I work in bioterrorism. I work in mathematics and biology, and so these are some of the books that we have published there. So let me tell you one of the other things that is important to know, because although people know the problem, sometimes people don't realize the magnitude of the problem that we have. And so this is data on 49 years of underrepresented minorities in the mathematical sciences. So you see the number of black African Americans are 94, Latinos 23 and 1 over 49 years. Now I say, well, there is a lot of well, there's a lot of international students, including I'm an immigrant. I wasn't raised here. I'm an immigrant, so I would not even belong to this group. But this is the group they are. Yes. The whole U.S. But this is 49 years, and you can see 139 PhDs. Okay, that just gives you an idea. And this has, what about the last 38 years? And this is the number of PhDs, of US PhDs, like 15,000 women, about 4,600, and so forth. But you can see the percentage is just pyrrhic. Okay, so you can see, you have a question?
Is that, what is that, like 2%?
Yeah, it's about 2%. Yeah, yes, 2% of the total, yes, and 1.61 of the total, and 0.4%. All in the mathematical science. And to given to U.S. residents or citizens, because about if you consider the foreign national, that doubles the number, so that would reduce, but that would not be the same comparison. So out of that established the Mathematical and Theoretical Biology Institute that we had in Cornell, Los Alamos, Arizona. I carry it everywhere I go. I might have. And the general idea here is to bring students. And it's how do you motivate people to do something? And that's a challenge. And the way you motivate people to do something is let them decide what they want to do. So that's the basic of this program. So we bring undergraduates, and they decide what they want to do. And the first thing that they'll learn is that faculty knows almost nothing. That they're much smarter than the faculty. As soon as you ask them something different, oh, I don't know. Okay. So when faculty give you a particular problem that they're an expert on, we look brilliant, just like when I teach calculus, it's, oh, he can do integrals on his sleep. Well, when you do it for 25 years, you might as well do it on your sleep, otherwise you should retire. But when they ask you, can I study the dynamics of bulimia? Say, what is bulimia? And that's where the problem starts. So we have done this, and we have let them decide the agenda. This was the first group. I was more energetic. They had 36 students in the program. And since this is statistics, this is my former colleague, George Casella, which passed away at the age of 61. He was one of the foremost Bayesian statisticians in the world. And one of the projects that they decide, well, some group of people started to study ecstasy. So there is a paper published on the dynamics of ecstasy. At one point, there was questions of Ebola, 2004. So there was a paper on Ebola. And there was the issue of SARS. So we wrote a paper on SARS eventually. And one student, a blind student, Nicolas Chrysostom, said, well, maybe we can model MTBI. Okay, so we model MTBI. And in fact, we prove a lot of theorems about MTBI. And there is a mathematical paper called Community Resilience in Collaborative Learning that appeared in the Discrete and Continuous Dynamical System, where you show that when you create communities of this type, are resilient, are almost indestructible, and they have a tremendous future. And we actually have a lot of theorems to show that. And some of the papers that we have, that people have come, is the first ever paper on the dynamics of bulimia by 4 women. Surprise, surprise. The effects of education and vaccination, HIV, and this is the one that I just mentioned, but there is literally hundreds of papers that have appeared. Through the program, we have had about 110 PhDs, I think now a lot more, and there is about 150 in grad school or maybe more. It's hard to keep track of all the students, and we have about 450 students. These are not quite up to date that have gone through the program. They have written about 180 technical reports on their own ideas. They are all online, so you can see them. Some of them have been plagiarized and published by other people. It's interesting. Okay, and so this is the kinds of things that we have. And there have been efforts of people to replicate them. Okay, so this you can see the same one. There was one in Puerto Rico that was done. I don't know, this is not very clear. And there was, I can't even understand the, myself. But there is about 4 summer programs that were created, model after this. The faculty came and spent time with us and developed the program. And this might be of some interest to you, although you might not be able to read it. is that there have been people that have come that they have wanted to do that. One is Anthony Tongen, and he wanted to do this, so he spent some time, and now he developed a program. David Hibbler, which was a person in the program, he had missed getting an NSF Career Award several times because he didn't have the Brothers Impact component, so he came and spent 2 straight summers, reshaped his own idea of what Brother Impact was and implemented it, and then he got the NSF Career Award. He's a tremendous researcher. We also have a high school program developed by Joaquin Bustos that passed away. He convinced me to go to Arizona and died in an accident before I got there. And one of our graduates you might know, that person I went to high school, is Chet Jackson, which is a professor of math biology at the University of Michigan. She came through that high school program. And there are papers that we have written about that. There are published lots of papers associated with that. These are just for some of them, but there are several more that we have published associated with the model. So let me meet you some of the stars. Sometimes I use this idea, show 10 pictures, and you have seen 10,000 different students. I remember the biologists that used to do with birds. Remember that, Lou? A guy used to show you 10 pictures or 15, 20 pictures of birds in Costa Rica, and they say, now you, and we go one right after the other, now you have seen 10,000 species. So that was a great, but anyway, these are some of the ones. All of these guys have finished their PhDs and are located. And one of them, former student of Jaime Escalante. And you haven't seen the movie Stand and Deliver, that's because you are too young, but that's a movie that we were seeing. Some of them have received awards from presidents. This woman, she came when she was 15 through the Arizona desert. Now she's assistant professor of neuroscience at UCLA. Johnny Guzman graduated from the highly selective school of Cal State Long Beach. Now he just got tenure at Brown University. Ryan Hernandez is at UC San Francisco. Karen Rio Soto is just got tenure at University of Puerto Rico. This is one of the women that wrote the paper on bulimia. She just had a position in biology at UC Merced. Some people make a lot of money. Carlos Torres, just Goldman Sachs. Last time he took me his $200,000 car. And then Sara Del Valle developed a great program in Los Alamos. Now she leads a program. She came there with us in the summer, and now she leads a research program there. Kenny Salau just doing a postdoc in Arizona. I think he just visited her. Kevin Flores just became a professor of individualized medicine at North Carolina State. And as Lou said, for that I got many recognitions for all the work of these students. So I met actually four presidents, but this is the one that I like the most for some reason. And so why is he hugging me there? He was telling us, give us some advice. And I said, that was before his reelection. Yes, but before we have to re-elect you. And everybody was completely quiet, and he laughed. I said, okay, Carlos. And we had a good time there. Let me tell you a little bit about data. And so SARS, that's all the data that we had. But we had data, okay? So that fits into this. And you can see exponential growth, right? And in fact, why don't you see exponential growth before here? Because that's when they learn how to diagnose SARS. But that depends. So that gives you the rate of growth, and we have seen in several, when they start the epidemic and when the growth there and things like that. And that's all the data that we have. And the epidemic was ongoing at that time in Canada, in Toronto. That was the epidemic in Toronto. And it had started to turn down. But then in March 18, they had discovered what was the diagnostic for, they were able to diagnose SARS. They knew the causative agent A. And what we use is some simple models and some statistical fitting to show that the only way you could fit the data is if it was quick diagnosis we now have, but also effective isolation. And with those two, without one of them, you just could not work. And I'll repeat that because that will come back. And then while the epidemic was going, we predicted that there was going to be no more than 400 cases, and there were 390-something in Canada. And that's what Gerardo won $10,000 from the Mexican president. Okay. So that's one problem. The other problem that we're interested in is influenza. So you see this pattern of influenza. This is the data that we have the last pandemic. And this is April 30. And I'm going to go through just quickly to this. This is April 30 when there were school closures. So some of you might remember there was a big scare. There was a new strain. And the question, how do you model this pattern of influenza? And as it looks like a wave. But it's not really a wave. And it's the fact that influenza spreads incredibly fast. When it started around this time, and it's not clear, almost pretty much when it was a case diagnosed in Mexico, the next day was a case diagnosed in Canada and a case diagnosed in the United States. So this idea that there is this special spread is not quite accurate. So how do you develop these kinds of patterns? And people talk about influenza waves. And I really don't quite believe that because of what we did here. So what we say, can we explain this pattern? So what we did is we modeled the whole influenza pandemic in Mexico. And this is the center of the universe, Mexico City. And then that's the surrounding states. And what we decided to do is to build a network around Mexico City, of course. And then we try to determine, we have essentially when people travel from here to here, they take a bus, they go to one of the terminals, they take the subway, they go to the other terminal, they go to the other way. So there are 4 bus terminals, and we got all the data that about the sort of the use of these kinds of transportations that take you to the city and take you to the other city. So that essentially will connect all the states as nodes, and depending on the traffic that there is and the number of passengers that there is, you will have some sort of dynamic connections between nodes. So we were going to build a network associated with that, but we needed more. But we used more information. And there's an anthropologist, Robert Acuña Soto, that's a very well-known anthropologist, that had been studying death certificates and determining where people have died. Because in Mexico, influenza wasn't a big deal until maybe 10 years ago. I think most people didn't even worry about, didn't even know they had influenza or not. And what he did is to determine that, and he realized that what they had these red dots, what he called influenza corridors. It's a lot of unusual large number of deaths that must have been attributed to something like influenza. So we decided to connect a network, and we wanted to have weighted the dynamics by population size. This is a little deceiving because this is the Mexico City, and this is the next place next to Mexico City. So this is just really one city with 22 million people. So it's about one of every 5 Mexicans lives there. And then the others are different. So this is what we call the, because they're the strongly connected, they're the weakly connected, and the strong and weakly connected is tied in with the traffic and population size. And this is the adjusted land and transportation flow by state per day. So there's the strongly connected, the weakly connected. And then in each state, we use a simple model where you have people that don't have influenza, people that are latent with influenza, people that are hospitalized, people that get symptoms, people that get vaccinated in case the vaccine arrived. By the time the vaccine arrived in Mexico, nobody needed it. And then the people that get recovered. And then, of course, we still have to, and Ben, I just saw those in some of the talks that were given yesterday about forest fires. You want to know when this is going to start and the rate of the start. So that's some methods to estimate this. This was sort of rough, but there are ways to estimate that. And again, the goal was to see if we can determine that pattern. And the question is, we have to decide where the epidemic was going to start. And we tried in different places, sometimes with various absurd circumstances. And all we could get is this pattern. We could not get anything even close to that. So then we remember that there were actually some changes that we had. There were school closures, vacation start, not vaccination never started, and school classes start. So at the beginning, people, this is sort of a measure of how well it's transmitting. And at the beginning, people went on with their lives. Then they closed the schools. People had to watch soccer games with empty stadiums. The restaurants became the cleanest in the world. Nobody was there also. And then eventually, people start going back to normal when they realize that, yes, it was bad, but not as bad as predicted. And then the summer comes, vacation starts, there is some reduction in contacts, and then when school starts, it goes back. So I said, why do we take this into account? And let me just focus on one of them. Maybe this one or this one. And in this case, you say in the first peak, it was dominated by the large cities. And these are the strongly connected, the weakly connected. Then the second peak, it just flipped. And the last peak, it was a connection of both of them. And with this, we can actually match the pattern associated with that. Let me see if I have want to show you something quickly there. This is how can you do this in a larger scale? This is called something transims. They modeled the city of Portland, and they essentially wanted to understand the flow of traffic between all the points in Portland, and this was done in the late in the 70s. The reason is how do we design the cities of the future so that we don't have traffic jams, and that we save gas. Okay, there is this moments of reflection about the American population. Maybe we shouldn't spend gas, and this goes like for a week, and then, oh, what the heck, let me buy this other car. And that's pretty much what happened. But there was this effort to do that, and they developed these cities, so they have physical, geological, geolocated locations, and then they have to have a synthetic population that more or less matches the characteristics of the one in Portland. And the thing, they have a schedule of activities, and I think they did a survey of what people do, right? So you have all these locations like homes, work, school, shopping, and things like that. And then this is the demographics. You can see that this is very accurate. Women make less than men. So I think that was the new law that was just rejected by the country about the equal law. So those that statistics will remain, and it's a significant, and it is shown there. And then you have this a typical family day, right? And which means the husband is here waiting for breakfast, and the wife is doing all the other stuff. And that's a typical day. But everybody has a schedule, and you have many people having that location. And we have a schedule for everybody, who gets up, who takes the kids to school, who goes this, who goes shopping, and things like that. And then and there is this model of the network. Let's see if I can. Oh, shoot. That was very exciting. Let me see. Oh, I have to remember how to use this. So you're gonna see this in fast motion here. Okay, I should have done differently, but let me see. I hope this movie works. Otherwise, I'll have to do it differently. So now they have modeled this city, and let's see. I'm not quite sure that this is gonna work here. Oh, that's too bad. Oh yeah, it works. There. And then you see here Luke coming to work. He's crossing the bridge there. 5 o'clock in the morning, nobody's here. You will know everything about him, his salary. This is Big Brother watching you. So, so that's the way it works there. So you have the city associated with that, and you have the activities that everybody does. And out of that, there has been lots of studies that people have done, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So, for example, you have people have looked at social contact networks, emerges, degrees of separations, connections between people. They have looked at degree distributions for each of the states. But what I'm going to tell you is a little bit different, because what we were interested in is what are the patterns of movement over time. What was the patterns of movement over time? In other words, at 6 o'clock in the morning, you have a very different network than at 7 o'clock, than at 8 o'clock. You have a very different network. And typically, we tend to think as the network, all the nodes connected, and we don't see this temporal transformation. So this is a table that tells you each of the person has an ID. They have about 180,000 people, and you have 1.5 million nodes. And this person, this is location, this is the arrival time, this is the departure time, and he's at home, work, and they have all this, and everybody has a schedule associated with that. And then what you want to have is the work activities, and then you can see the proportion of work-related activities, school activities, social activities, home activities, and they take place at different times. For example, you can see that social activities tend to be after work or later on. So you have associated with this. And then there are things that can be clustering coefficients. And the clustering is really, really, really high, where, for example, in random networks is very small. It is very, very high. And you have additional things, like, as I said, the total number of nodes, size of the largest component, total directed edges. So you have all those possible statistics associated with this network that you can actually do. But and based upon that, you can also have some relationship, which is the clustering coefficient as a function of the activity. And you can see it's different for different activity. And by the way, this would be different at different times. So you wouldn't have the same structure at different times. And you could have, for example, all the activities, and you wanted to think of some sort of hierarchical model, right? You can put, there are 3 activities. There will be all activities. Then you could have subgroups of 2 submerged within those activities, and maybe see what is the relationship between one level and the next level. And then you can see how the largest component changes over time. This is at 5 something in the morning, and this is at 7. And you can see how the component growth is better seen in this graph. So this is the evolution of the largest component from almost not connected to almost everything connected. And you can see that. And you can also see the distribution of cluster size as a function of time. And here you have at 4 a.m., and you have at 6 a.m. And this is the kinds of activity. So we have actually determined scaling laws, but the coefficients depend on the time, okay, and the activity. And if you aggregate the activities, you get something different, and so forth. So I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip here. So here you have, you can identify these highly connected nodes, and you can correlate traffic with degree. And anyway, we don't have a lot of time, but yeah, scaling laws generated by pedestrian traffic seem to be pervasive at different temporal scales and level of aggregation. Pedestrian traffic can generate small wall and scale-free structures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So I wanted to mention this because some of you here were interested in networks, and I can send you all the papers. A lot of these papers, you just send me an email, I'll send them to you right away. So you have to do that. There are some of the references that we have here. And then the question now, when you have this structure, we did this about 2005 or something like that. Can we put epidemics on these structures, right? Now that we have them there. So people have done structures, so you can have disease models where you have people susceptible, incubating, or infected. You can make it as complicated as you want to. You can put H structure, you can put whatever you want to, and then you can model them on this series. And this is just one of the first ones. I think if you see there's not, yeah, I see. I'm trying to figure out how this works. This is a situation where you have an epidemic of influenza, and this is a situation where people are worried they do not interact with each other, but they continue to do the same. And the patterns are essentially the same, but the scales are very, very different. What is very surprising to me, the first time I did it, you look at the aggregated data, and if you look at at the simplest possible epidemic model, you get exactly that aggregated pattern. Right? So in fact, these simple models can capture the dynamics of this. Maybe you have to be very careful like what was the translation from one parameter to the other parameter, but they can actually capture those epidemics to do that. And there are things, of course, that you learn from the details of this. Some of the things when they study epidemics in these kinds of networks is that if you talk to epidemiologists, they say most of the secondary case of infection takes place at hospitals. At schools. And it turns out to be that most of the secondary case of infection takes place at home. And even when they did this simulation at Los Alamos, when they had 300 million people, they pattern of where the simulations take place. But now you can see when you have all this temporal data, so many, how do you sample from this data? You cannot analyze the whole data. How do you sample from this data so that you can actually get some idea of what is going on? So that's one of the cases. And if I have a few minutes, I'll tell you a little bit about Ebola. And I don't know how am I doing, Lou? Do I have still a few minutes? Well, Lou is not paying attention, so I can go. Okay. So let me tell you something quickly about Ebola. You just authorized me to do that. and this is going to be something briefly because we were working about that. So all of you know about Ebola, and this is West Africa, okay? And so the question is, what do you do? So as the Ebola epidemic was going, we already know how to compute the rate of exponential growth. And we know that everybody was going to jump and do that, which is fine. That we need that information. But what we tried to figure out, as we estimated, we just were looking, and not because we want to say everybody's going to do this. We start looking at estimating this rate of exponential growth. And what we know, or what we suspected, is typically you have a rate of exponential growth. And in time, because some people start becoming infected and some people start avoiding each other, you expect the rate of exponential growth to slow down. So that's what you expect. So this let's look at that. And studying the rate exponential, the changes on the rate of exponential growth, sometimes is referred as the effective reproduction number. So typically, at the beginning is 2, then it might be 1.9, 1.8, etc. If it is less than 1, then that means that you don't replace yourself as infectious, so the epidemic can start to go down. And that's important, the basic reproductive number, because it really has an impact on the size of the epidemic. And so that's an important number. So, so essentially, we wanted to do that. And what we look is at the data of this country, Sierra Leone, and so forth. And what we had is this data. And what we tried to do is to I tried to learn a statistical language. I was trying to remember what Luke was telling and the statistical says. You take like a little window and you slide it and estimate the reproductive number by using, let's say, 10 points and different 10 points, and then and you estimate the rate exponential growth. And we did that, and we wrote this paper in plus. Maybe it's the wrong plus. I don't know if I should be plus. It's a +3. And actually, this becomes very political, and believe me, nature, they get, you have to have connections to get this quickly, because this actually was a pretty good work, but everybody that got R0 first, that's the first publication there. But anyway, and this has the rates of growth of, that's the data that we had in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea. We didn't use Nigeria. And this is some of the rough data you have. This is just not such a great data here. And this is the variation that we had. And this was the key issue. Gosh, it seems to be growing. The rate of exponential growth, rather than going down, it seems to be growing. And then we used that to predict how many cases of Ebola were going to be in 2 weeks, not just in 2 weeks. And we predicted that we're going to be 6,800. It actually went 7,000. And you saw these people say they're going to be 500,000 and things like that. I knew that those were wrong, but you know, of course, if you have a pattern going like that forever, yeah, but it's not going to happen. Anyway, the question is, why did it grow? Well, some of the decisions that the government took in early August, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia implemented military enforced cordons, sanitary cordons, to try to control the spread of the disease. And essentially, they locked you up, and there were riots and fights for food and things like that. So that increased the level of interaction with people with Ebola, and that actually increased the number of cases. So that's the effect that we had, and that we published that there. Then we just published a little paper in Lancet with my other student, Diego Chawel, and the general idea, he is interested in cancer, but he works in biodesign, and the general idea, there are ways to actually diagnose Ebola rather quickly. Of course, before you have symptoms. Because at the beginning, you might be infected, and it might be undetectable, but it might, at one point, might be detectable by more refined biological methods. And the question that we asked was simple. So what is the effect of early detection of Ebola at the pre-symptomatic stage on the transmission dynamics of the 2014 epidemic? And we developed a model that essentially the methods involve polymerase chain reaction. They can detect Ebola. And we tried to see, is this, if we had this way of doing it, would this be enough? We developed a very simple model, susceptible, non-detectable, pre-symptomatic, detectable, pre-symptomatic, infectious, hospitalized, etc. And we can write equations like this, and yeah, we know how to. And then we did some simulations. But the general idea is even if you do this really, really well, your success is not tied into how well you do that. It has to be in conjunction with effective isolation. If you isolate, if you do, let's say, 80% early detection, and you isolate only 30% of the people, it's like you would have done nothing. But there is a threshold, maybe 50%, maybe 55%, at which it makes a dramatic difference. So that was pretty much the result that we published, and saying that early detection is great, but it has to be in conjunction with these measures, and that there are actually some levels that have to be achieved before you have actually a dramatic impact on the dynamics of Ebola. Thank you.